Well, sharing economy is the economy of platforms, essentially. That's the way we try to call it. It used to be more, let's say, the economy of truly gifts and sharing, sharing various resources with one another. But later on, it got sort of into a more tricky, let's say, space where big companies like Uber and others were trying to say, yes, we are also part of this gift economy. So in order to escape, this, maybe a bit blurry term, and to say precisely what we mean, we decided to focus on collaboration between humans and groups and not on the platforms themselves and whether they are commercial, non-commercial and whatnot. So we decided to, say that we clearly mean, the modi, the different patterns of collaboration between humans and not necessarily tools and platforms that they are using.
Esto es La Inquietud con Garret Edwards, el lugar donde hay más preguntas que certezas.
Damos vuelta de página aquí en La Inquietud por CNN Radio Rosario. Tenemos un enorme honor, placer y privilegio. Ella es profesora asociada y vicepresidente de la Universidad Kozminski en Varsovia, Polonia. Hizo su doctorado en Filosofía de la Inteligencia Artificial en el Instituto de Filosofía de la Universidad de Varsovia. Es la jefa del Centro de Investigaciones de Interacciones entre los Humanos y las Máquinas en esa misma universidad. Estuvo haciendo estudios e investigaciones de postdoctorado en el Centro para la Inteligencia Colectiva en el Massachusetts Institute of Technology, en el MIT, en los Estados Unidos de América. Es también investigadora visitante en el American Institute for Economic Research, AIER, en los Estados Unidos de América. Acaba de publicar recientemente The Collaborative Society, la sociedad colaborativa, con la editorial del MIT junto a Dariusz Jemielniak, y va a estar dentro de muy poco como investigadora senior en el programa de Trabajo y Vida Laboral en la Universidad de Harvard. Es ALEKSANDRA PRZEGALINSKA quien está del otro lado. ALEKSANDRA, so pleased to have you here with us. Garret Edwards here on the other side.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here with you.
And it's such a pleasure for us to be talking about so many things that are at the forefront right now, Alexandra. And I want to start with probably the most obvious question, because you just published a Collaborative Society with Jemielniak. What's the Collaborative Society?
Well, I guess we were trying to capture certain phenomena of how people work together and collaborate using newest technologies, emerging technologies. And, the interesting part of it, I think, is that we were writing this book before COVID, and we were writing a lot about how work will become more and more remote, more digitized, and how you will be able to include more and more people to your work because it's going to be more global. Then when we published in March 2020, this whole phenomenon of remote work and online work just, rolled out in front of our eyes. So we, I think, did not expect this collaborative society, digitized society of collaboration to happen so quickly, to accelerate at this pace. But we're definitely trying to capture how people work together when they are not together, right? When they are sharing just the online space together. What are the good sides of such work? What are the challenges related to that work? And also, what are the most important technologies that are accompanying us in this type of work, including artificial intelligence, but also blockchain, IoT, and others.
Alexandra, one of the very first things that you do in this book is you make a difference with maybe a term that has become more common than collaborative society, which is the sharing economy. What's the difference between the sharing economy and the collaborative society?
Well, sharing economy is the economy of platforms, essentially. That's the way we try to call it. It used to be more, let's say, the economy of truly gifts and sharing, sharing various resources with one another. But later on, it got sort of into a more tricky, let's say, space where big companies like Uber and others were trying to say, yes, we are also part of this gift economy. So in order to escape, this, maybe a bit blurry term, And to say precisely what we mean, we decided to focus on collaboration between humans and groups, and not on the platforms themselves and whether they are commercial, non-commercial, and whatnot. So we decided to, say that we clearly mean, the modi, the different patterns of collaboration between humans, and not necessarily tools and platforms that they are using.
Alexandra, you just mentioned some platforms, some that we have gotten used to having on our smartphones for years and years. You just mentioned Uber. I could think, for example, about Airbnb, which you also discuss in the book. They have really changed the way that we relate to other people. Have they made it easier for us to be able to conduct transactions with people with whom we may have not in the past?
Surely so, and to a large extent, yes. But you know very well, because Argentina is, a very frequent country for visitors. There are many people who like to travel and do tourism in Argentina, that there are some challenges related to that as well, right? So there have been protests, for instance, because, big parts of the city are unoccupied because there are empty flats just waiting for tourists instead of flats that are full of people who are local. So we are trying to tackle that as well in our book and say, listen, there are good sides of, convenience that is related to these platforms, but there are also those maybe more negative sides related to gentrification issues in various cities worldwide, or for instance, the fact that you get a lot of free labor, labor that is unaccounted for because it's just gig economy, right? So sharing economy is turning slowly into a gig economy with no job security. And I think this is something that we were trying to address as well. But having that said, I think there are many good sides to the fact that we've developed various platforms of that kind. And I am hoping that maybe we will be able to make them a bit more collaborative back again in the future, correcting the mistakes that have been made in the past decade.
You singled out a very important issue there, Alexandra, because you talk about the backlash that some of these platforms get, either from all people in the market, either from the users or the consumers. How do you think regulation ties with everything when it comes to these platforms?
Well, that's a big question because they were escaping regulation for a very long time. And this is something we also address in the book. So we're trying to say, listen, there has been a vacuum. And they were operating in that vacuum for a fairly long time, and they got used to operating in that regulatory vacuum, if you will. However, obviously, particularly in Europe, I'm originally Polish, now in the US, but, essentially more often in Warsaw, Poland. So in Europe, we have definitely more regulations, and we have upcoming regulations regarding platforms because, there has been an accusation of, let's say, unfair competition. Your classical taxi drivers were definitely very unhappy about Uber, but they've also learned a bit how to operate better from Uber. That's yet another thing to say, right? So they learned how to create platforms to be more convenient for the users because, they asked themselves a question, why am I not selected or chosen, right, for the ride, but rather an Uber, right? Is it just the price factor or a few other factors as well? So I think, it's both sides. But I also have to tell you that we will have probably new regulations tackling newest platforms that are using emerging technologies. And from my perspective, I work in the field of AI. There has been no direct regulation of artificial intelligence yet, right? Even though it's very often making decisions about many things in our life, right? Like medical diagnosis or recommendation of products to buy and whatnot. These are all AI algorithms. And we will have a new regulation in Europe. It's called the AI Act. And it's going to tackle the risk related to artificial intelligence usage. And so I think this whole field is still very unfamiliar to people, right? So, we have to learn about it a bit first. And only then, I guess, we can think about regulations. So it took us a while to regulate somehow sharing economy to make it work. And it's going to take us a while more to regulate various newest phenomena, right? That we can't fully address yet because we don't know what their consequences will be.
You just mentioned AI. Alexandra, I'm going to put a pin there because we definitely want to talk about that with you. But before getting on to that, you dedicate with Jemielniak a chapter on peer production. And there's something that has always amazed me about the internet. I don't think I've ever said it out loud, but we probably all think about it. You think about something, you see something on the TV, you discuss something with someone, and probably not even a minute later, you can find something on the internet because somebody has thought about it, somebody has been worried about it, and somebody's sharing and collaborating with other people. And you study in the book that collaboration is something that is actually quite human, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We are saying that this has been our greatest success evolution-wise, that we were able to collaborate successfully with one another and also form bigger groups of collaboration. Because if there is a big group contributing, the effects of that group working together will be, very synergetic and will be more abundant, right? So if you have more people joining into certain movement, they are contributing to this movement, and their, collective sort of action or collective endeavor will produce even greater results than it would if they were just working in the isolated manner, right? Just on their own. So we definitely claim in the book that collaboration is our feature of humanity. We can obviously compete with one another, and you could argue it's also in a way a form of collaboration, or could be viewed as such in some context, but most certainly something that is prevalently ours, and that allowed us to, I think, succeed, right, in various endeavors, is the fact that we are able to collaborate, and this is something that we intuitively do.
Alexandra, you just said humanity, and I'm going to connect it with AI, and I'm going to be probably choosing the wrong terms and phrase it in a way that the question has more punch. Are machines getting closer to being like us?
Well, great question, although a tough one to answer, I have to say, because I could tell you that, well, first of all, at the very foundation of artificial intelligence as a discipline of science, the idea or the quest was to create something human-like, to create something that thinks like a human, that is able to reason like human, even communicate like humans, or perceive like we do, right, visually and whatnot. So the quest in the field of artificial intelligence is to create human-like systems, or at least systems that can communicate effectively with humans and understand what we mean, what we want, and respond to our needs, right? So in that sense, I think this quest is an ongoing quest. But if I was to say whether we are already there, well, I don't think so, right? And it will take a very long time if we really want to get there, because human-like artificial intelligence does not exist. We have plenty of different algorithms that are solving optimization issues, that are predicting something for us for the future, that are solving various narrow tasks for us humans, and they can through that also collaborate with us very effectively. So they are becoming partners in this whole collaboration. However, they are not subjects, right? So they are clearly tools or extensions of what we want, rather than systems that have their own volition, that they have their own will, and any kind of affective states, right? So emotions that are, drivers very often in our lives, right? So they don't lead any life, they don't have any goals. However, they can, to some extent, simulate reasoning effectively, and they can also communicate with us. We are already there. So we do have systems that can use language like yours and mine, Spanish, English, Polish, and communicate with us, respond to our queries, and have a conversation with us. That will be perhaps sometimes even a successful one. So yeah, we are halfway there, I would say.
We have seen literature, movies, TV shows warning about our machine overlords taking our place. Why do you think that science fiction worries so much about that side of artificial intelligence?
Hollywood is always looking for, let's say, a good story. And in a good story, a compelling story, you have to have this villain or an evil character. And I think sometimes it's another human being, and sometimes it's just simply AI. So it can be exploited in that way. But in reality, in science, we are far away from any images of that kind, really. I mean, we are just focusing on building more or less successful algorithms for certain tasks that we want them to solve. So I do think that, there is a lot of fear spreading around artificial intelligence that really comes from Hollywood. And I think we scientists, we have to deal with that. People want to watch such stories, and we have to ourselves be able to address that. No, we are not producing any kind of overlord or terminator. We're actually trying to do the contrary. Maybe create systems that will be able to help you in your work so that you can focus on stuff that is more important to you and you don't have to do all the routine stuff or mundane stuff. So I do think that, there is a certain misconception related to artificial intelligence that Hollywood has its own direction and science has its own direction, and only rarely would they meet. But having that said, I can tell you that my favorite movie that depicts artificial intelligence in a very positive way, I think, and very accurately too, is Interstellar, because it shows AI systems that help humans in their missions. So that's, to me, something that's most accurate about AI as of today.
We're also recommending that Christopher Nolan movie, Alexandra, because it's really great. You just talked about a natural language processing and how some machines can sound like us, speak our languages. For example, we're getting in a few months Top Gun 2 with Val Kilmer, who can't speak anymore, but he'll be using a machine that has studied all his lines throughout his movies so they can reenact his voice. We are getting to a place where machines at least can replicate the things we do, even if they are not doing them entirely by themselves, right?
Well, some of them can do something actually quite original, I would say. So one thing is obviously speech synthesis that you referred to. So machines are learning to speak like humans, and not always would their intonation be okay, but mostly it's quite accurate, or at least, within our margins of tolerance. I watched yesterday a new movie on Netflix about Andy Warhol. It's a documentary movie based on his memoirs. And then you again have the main narrator would be Warhol, who never said those things that are said there, but it's just, a bot that replicates his voice that kind of reads the script. So it's kind of very entertaining and interesting to hear, Andy Warhol talking things that he has never said, because technology allows for that. But then again, as I said, we also have systems that are able to, let's say, contribute more broadly. So you can, for instance, have systems today, and many people don't know of that. You can have systems that are going to make a very accurate prediction about the future. If you look at the case of coronavirus, not many people know that actually in 2019, at the beginning of November, an AI system called Blue Dot predicted that there was a pandemic already spreading in Wuhan, and it signaled it, right? But it's just that people are not really listening to it, I guess, but it just captured certain signals saying, hey, there is definitely an epidemics happening there. Just look into that. So AI, based on the data input that it receives, can really make very, let's say, complex operations that can serve as predictions of potential scenarios of how the future will unfold. And in that way, it's creative. I think it can be innovative. Or the other example would be those systems that play strategic games. Think about Go, think about chess. The current masters or champions of these games are actually AI systems, because they're always one step ahead, right? They come up with all possible scenarios of how the game could unfold and bring the most optimal out of it. And what is interesting also is that when it comes to the game of Go, the human champion, Lee Sedol, when he was playing with an AI system called AlphaGo, he said that the system used strategies of playing that game that were not used by anybody ever before, that they were original per se and innovative, and that he, through that, has learned how to play in a completely different way.
That's so interesting, Alexandra. When you were explaining that with Jemielniak, you were writing the collaborative society before even COVID struck, and how things ended up being a lot like you were thinking. We mentioned in the introduction that you are joining as a senior research associate at the Harvard Labor and Work-Life Program. How do you see the next few years changing or going when it comes to the workforce?
Well, I mean, there are many things that I think of, but generally one very big term or big important topic is, I think, reskilling. We will have many jobs that will change because of technology, because they can assist us, because various technologies can assist us in our work. So the scope of our work will change, and the tools that we will be using for work will also change. So I think that's one very important factor that we have to take into account, that our jobs will be there, but they will be different or transformed from what we have known. And that's one thing. The other thing that I think of is actually, collaboration again, but broadly speaking. First of all, in the context, again, of artificial intelligence, I think we can expect many new tools in AI that will serve different domains of our activities, from agriculture and education to the legal sector, to the financial sector, healthcare sector. You will get support from AI tools in many of these places. You will get support in marketing and sales and cybersecurity. All of that will be somehow tackled or penetrated by AI. So you or us, all of us, will have to learn how to work effectively with these systems, right? How to really collaborate with them in a meaningful way. But also, I think we have to learn how to collaborate with one another. Those soft skills are very important. This is something that we are pretty good at as humans, but we don't use the potential of it. We are not able, and that's my observation also from various schools in Europe, kids are not learning how to work in teams together, right? How to harness their collective intelligence, how to be empathetic towards one another, and really go in one direction when it comes to certain goals, right, that you want to achieve as a team. So I do think that collaboration between ourselves, humans, amongst ourselves, and our collaboration with machines are two topics that are very important for the coming decade.
But we'll still have radio shows, right, Aleksandra?
Absolutely. You can just have your AI system that will select the best guests for you. For instance, you can just click and say, listen, I want a guest on these topics. How about you prioritize these guests for me and tell me which one fits best? And then you supervise such a system, but it's clearly a help for you.
Yeah, or we'll get AI host as well. So
no, that's not going to happen.
No, not yet.
We need humans. We need interaction with one another, charisma and whatnot.
Exactly. Aleksandra, we have the last question to ask you. We ask this question out of every interviewee because the show is called La Inquietud in Spanish. So it is a pun, but the pun is kind of lost in translation. So we have the English version now. What makes Aleksandra Przegalinska restless?
Safe, democratized, and open artificial intelligence for everyone. AI for humans.
Aleksandra, thank you very much for your time and the time you have shared with our audience. And we send you a really, really big hug.
Thank you so much. Gracias. And I'm very happy to have been here.
Muchísimas gracias. La tendríamos a Aleksandra Przegalinska aquí en La Inquietud por CNN Radio Rosario.
Esto fue La Inquietud con Garret Edwards. Síguenos en redes sociales y en www.edwards.com.ar.